My name's Glenn Rawdon. If you don't know, I'm with LSC's TIG program, and we wanted to talk to you today about another aspect of portals that we've not really discussed as we've been doing this. We've had sessions at the last couple of TIG grants talking about Legal Navigator. That's the project that LSC is working on with Pew, the National Center for State Court, Pro Bono Net, and others to do a legal portal. And we've talked to you about the technology for a couple of years, but what we wanted to do now was something a little different and talk to you about the opportunities that the portals present for you to build partnerships within your state to improve access to justice. And along with those opportunities also come challenges. And so that's something else that we want to be talking to you today. And so I brought together a group of people here to talk with you. I've got Nicole Nelson from Alaska Legal Services, Neilani Fujimori-Kaina from Hawaii, Bob Glaze from the Illinois Bar Foundation, Chicago. I'm sorry. I apologize. And Amy Clark from Illinois Legal Aid Online and Gwen Daniels from Illinois Legal Aid Online. And what we're going to do is discuss what they've been doing around their portal projects and building these partnerships and how that has really led to some unique opportunities for them. And so first I'm going to start with Amy because Illinois Legal Aid Online has been doing this a long time. Their work has led to over 100 different self-help centers around the state. And so could you tell us a little bit, Amy, about how you've been able to do that and build that much support?
Sure. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Illinois Legal Aid Online, also known as ALEO, partners with courts and libraries throughout Illinois to operate as legal self-help centers. So what that means is they provide access to IllinoisLegalAid.org, our statewide website, and they use the site to help their patrons find and use self-help legal information and court forms. We currently support about 180 legal self-help center locations in 99 Illinois counties, so we're missing 3 counties is all. And most of those are located in public libraries. And so I generally train the library and courthouse staff on how to use our website, and then we call that staff the staff navigators because they help people navigate our resources. We also, to provide support, we also maintain a navigator listserv where I send, periodically I send information about new resources or new forms that they should know about. And I also provide training for, refresher training for existing legal self-help centers or set up new legal self-help centers with the training. And I do that training either in person or via webinars. So I'll talk a little bit about how we got where we are today. So we started establishing the legal self-help centers in 2005. We partnered with the Illinois Coalition for Equal Justice to establish legal self-help centers. And by March of 2014, there was at least one legal self-help center in every Illinois county, so 102 counties. And many of those counties had multiple locations. It was a huge undertaking, and when we started, because it was in response to a 2005 report about the needs of low-income people in Illinois, and one of the recommendations to fill some of the needs that they had was that we create legal self-help centers in all the courthouses. So initially we worked to create 3 types of legal self-help centers, so 3 models. One was just in the courthouse, and these tended to be in larger population counties, and often with full-time staff in the legal self-help center. Another kind or another model is where we had a legal self-help center both in the courthouse and a local library, at least one local library. And then the third model was a legal self-help center in just a public library. And we did those mostly in the low population rural counties. The planning process was that the legal self-help center planning was led by the chief or the presiding judge in each county, or in some counties, the leadership came from the circuit clerk. And ALEO provided training and support to local partners in the area, so training domestic violence advocates, local court staff, and library staff. And we trained them on the difference between legal information and advice, as well as how to use our website and our automated forms. And then each opening, every time we open a new legal self-help center, there was a press conference and often a news clipping to promote the opening of the center. What we learned during that process was that it was really important to involve the local libraries. Librarians are natural navigators. They're used to helping people find information. It's what they're all about. And they're really good at understanding the difference between information and advice. They also have the essential resources for a legal self-help center. So they have computer access, internet access, and printers, which was more important before e-filing. And then another reason they're really great partners for legal self-help centers is that they have more accessible hours of operation. So many of the courthouses in less populated counties tend to be have limited hours, and so the libraries could provide additional access outside those hours. And then also, it's good to have libraries as partners because people don't always realize they have a legal issue. They wouldn't necessarily think to go to a self-help center in a courthouse unless they actually had business there. But they naturally tend to go to a library for information. So, and then librarians really just treat our website as another database, another resource for people looking for answers. So that's initially what we learned, and then since then, we've learned that, as time has gone on, we've realized some legal self-help centers have closed. Not a lot, but we did realize that the legal self-help centers really needed a local champion. So I think the hope was when we set these up is that the groups that we brought together in each county would continue to provide a leadership for the self-help centers, but really that didn't happen. Most legal self-help centers were never promoted beyond the initial press conference, and so there just isn't a lot of public awareness about the centers as a resource. Some did close without the leadership. Again, there weren't that many, really, which was actually surprising. We did a survey and we found that many, even though we don't have extended contact or engagement with a lot of the libraries. They're out there using our resource. We don't hear from them, but they are using us and they do know about us. And another reason that the legal self-help centers need champions is that there isn't a whole lot of collaboration between the libraries and courthouses and that was kind of the hope too when we set up the centers, that they would collaborate, but they're not coordinating their referrals and they aren't sharing knowledge that could really help people and self-represented litigants. So that's kind of our next step now, the future of our partnerships is that we realized we needed to look beyond the legal self-help centers to extend the reach of our website and our resources. So we decided now we still have the legal self-help centers. We certainly still support them, and I certainly also will continue to set them up in any library that asks me to, or courthouse. But now we're seeking new partnerships with social service agencies, workforce development agencies, things like that, in order to have people who are, they're very engaged with the people that they're working with, and so we hope with those relationships will increase our reach of our resources and also get feedback as to the kind of information that people need and where there might be gaps in our resources. So that's where we are moving forward.
Thanks very much, Amy. One thing is, she talked a lot about the library, so I'm going to put in a plug for something that LSC is doing. We are working to prepare materials for libraries so that they can learn more about their role in civil justice. And there's going to be a free webinar on the 11th of February if you'd like to join that, so you can see about this curriculum, about this resource that we're going to be providing to your local libraries, and then maybe you can enlist them to use some of this to help educate them around how to find help for their patrons that come in with legal issues. So again, that'll be on February 11th. If you're interested, you can email me and I'll send you a link so that you can register for the webinar. Bob, that's just part of the story that we heard about Aleo's role in this. Now, there's more to access to justice in Chicago and Illinois than what she's talked about. Can you tell us more about the partnerships and challenges that you've met there?
Sure. So first, hello, everybody. I am from Chicago. That is in Illinois, but the Chicago Bar Foundation. Just to clear up Glenn here. But I want to ask you a few questions before I jump into what Glenn just asked me to talk about. So first, just to kind of figure out who's here, how many of you are legal aid lawyers? And for those of you watching online, I'll give a quick, it's about 20% of the room probably at least. How many are IT professionals at legal aid or elsewhere? So we got, what would you call yourself? Yes, technologists. Okay, all right. I don't know the lingo, you can tell. I'm speaking like a lawyer here, huh? Other legal professionals, not technology, not lawyers. Funders are coming, yes. There were some funders in here. I see Mr. Sandman's over here from LSC, and we have our host from Oregon here as well as among the funders, other funders too. Law library, good. All right, so we do have librarians in the house, because that's good to see. What's that? Academics. So we got some academics too. All right. Anybody else I'm missing as a group? Consultants. Yes. All right, good. All right, so we got a good mix of people. For those of you watching online, it's a pretty mixed crowd here. So you heard earlier, I think everybody heard this, that this is the largest crowd ever to come to this conference, almost 600 people. We are in one of the sessions that's being broadcast online. A lot of the conference is going to be online. So I'm curious, this is not a trick question. I'm just asking this, and you can just shout out answers if you want, but here we are, we're in a conference around technology and how technology can connect us and create more access to justice, and more people than ever before have come in person to be here to talk about this stuff. Why? Why are we all here? Why did we come across the country in some cases, or from outside the country in some cases, all the way here to talk about this stuff, rather than just do it online? We could have just made this one big webinar. I'm sure that was not it. John said that was my personality. I'm positive that's not it. Judith.
A lot of it's networking with each other.
Oh.
You couldn't necessarily get on a webinar as to come here so that you can have conversations with your other attendees.
Okay, so I'm going to have to repeat answers for people watching online, but that's a good one. Networking with the other attendees and getting to know them is a good one. Any other answers? Any other reasons?
The word I've heard a lot this morning is inspiration.
Inspiration. Good. That's a good reason to come in person. Any other reason?
Updates on what's happening.
Updates on what's happening, John says. You could have gotten that online, though, too, right?
Much more fun this way.
And he said it's much more fun this way. All right, good.
I think I learned as much from questions and comments of other people in the room and in the informal sessions as I do and it's hard to pick that up in webinar as well.
Okay, so I'm going to paraphrase that a little bit. Learn a lot informally in conversation and from questions and from feedback from conversations, not necessarily from the presenters. Yes? Okay, uninterrupted focus without distractions of the workplace around us. All right, these are all good answers. So there's a lot of good reasons that people came here in person. And the reason I ask that is, as we're thinking about access and all these different technology solutions to it, Jim alluded to this earlier, technology is not the solution to everything. There is a lot we get from in-person interactions and that people who need our help get from in-person interactions that is not going to work as well online or just through technology. And finding, it's something the royal we, everybody in this room and all the people we work with have to do better is helping people, clients, people who need help, figure out when is it, like the ODR solution this morning, perfect for small disputes, things that just don't make a ton of sense to come down to court. But where's the line with that where it's probably going to be beneficial to speak to a lawyer or to be able to talk about this in person to resolve it. We don't do a good enough job as a whole in educating clients and prospective clients when they should be reaching out to us when they can do things on their own. It's not a bright line all the time, but we could do better there. And in this portal concept, that is one of the things that we're going to need to help people with is there's going to be all these different options from self-help all the way to extended representation. How do we help people along the way figure out where they should be and when? That's just a question. I'm not answering that. I don't know how to answer that yet. So, but it's something we should be thinking about. So, but anyway, back to what I'm supposed to talk about, which is the idea that Illinois Legal Aid Online is a great website that brings the legal aid community together, content for the public, as you heard, partnering with libraries, courts, and others, is a great resource. In the portal world, and you'll hear more about this from Alaska and Hawaii, there's other folks we got to bring into this too, though. The courts, the private bar, other social services Amy mentioned, and other partners, including libraries that we want to have involved in this too. And the IT challenge that Gwen's going to talk about at the end, just within legal aid, to connect everybody this way is challenging. You add in courts and all these other partners, and it becomes even more of a challenge. But it's a challenge that we want to undertake. And as we go after that challenge, one of the things, again, there's a conference around legal aid where we're all focused on today on low-income people. But these issues go well into the middle class. They need the same kind of help. And in some cases have even less of it available than legal aid, if you can believe that. And they are going to be coming into these portals too. You probably see them in your offices too, people you have to turn away for income or other reasons. Where do they go? Is another kind of big question that we have to be answering and thinking about in the design of these portals, that it's not just low-income people that we're talking about. Certainly not in the pro se population in the courts, for sure not. And I'll be interested to hear more from the Alaska and Hawaii folks about how how they're navigating that too. And then another issue that we haven't quite gotten to in Illinois yet to figure out is there are a lot of, and Jim and a couple others talked about this morning, you've got LegalZoom and Rocket Lawyer and a lot of these different for-profit providers who are providing solutions or proposed solutions to people. How do we bring them into this? What are the standards for bringing for-profit providers into this? I don't think we've come up with any in Illinois yet, but it's something, there's a lot of innovation going on in the for-profit technology community. Jim was pointing out in his remarks this morning how important it is to bring them more into the mix to help us, but also to help clients. Where do we put them on the spectrum of these portals? How do we judge when they should be in there, when they shouldn't, quality and otherwise? It's big questions, right? But these are some of the things that are challenges and opportunities, because a lot of these resources can really help people. We don't have to do it all ourselves. Same goes for private bar. Bar associations are one means into that, but coming up with ways to connect people who do need a lawyer, aren't going to qualify for legal aid, how to get people there through these portals. The typical bar association referral process has not been the most efficient. I say this as somebody who works for a bar. The most efficient way to do that. There is some good technology being developed from companies like Community Lawyer, who are here at this conference, well represented, who are coming up with good tech platforms for it. But that's something we have to be able to integrate into this too, because we've got people coming from different places who are going to need different kinds of help, and that's going to be one of the challenges. Libraries are one I think crosses all sectors that we should be. Law libraries and public libraries should be part of the solution, part of these networks, no matter where we go. When we get into social services, though, one of the things we found in the early conversations around this in Illinois is it really depends a lot, and this is probably those of you who are in legal aid have probably seen this firsthand as well. Depends a lot on what the issue is. So we had a big mortgage foreclosure program during the crisis, the economic crisis, that was geared to helping people in foreclosure. And the type of social services and the type of services that we were connecting them to were really different than, say, somebody with a family law issue. And we needed housing counseling. We needed, anybody who does this work could spit these out, but different kinds of expertise that you're bringing into that particular situation that's really different than other legal areas. And there isn't, it's to find representatives of each of these. So it's in the big portal concept, we probably want to be thinking a little bit about within that, within big, broad subject areas, who are the partners, because they aren't going to always be the same. And trying to find representative partners in each of those things. And then the last thing I'll touch on for right now is the rules of professional conduct. There are a couple sessions on that issue. Those who are lawyers in the room, outside of things like conflicts of interest and the day-to-day things that come up in the practice, I'd venture to guess that most of us haven't thought a lot about those rules since we had to take the bar. But they really have a lot of impact on technology and on the way the business of law works in ways that I will just say for myself, I hadn't really thought about very much till a few years ago when we were trying to scale up an incubator program we have to help people in the middle income market be able to reach lawyers who are using new ways of reaching them. As we're trying to scale it and we're looking at the rules, they are really from a different era altogether. And so most of these rules were created before we had online artificial intelligence sort of solutions. So things like, how do we define the practice of law? You talk to any lawyer, they're against the unauthorized practice of law, I guarantee you. But what is the practice of law? And anybody want to try to answer that? We got an answer to that one just that they can rip off because we're telling everybody else they can't do it. But what is it? So I'm not surprised. It's tricky to define it. It shouldn't be, though. It shouldn't be that hard if we're going to tell people they can't do it to be able to tell them what it is.
The precedents all say we'll call it on a case-by-case basis and not try a definition.
So John's saying it's the old "we know it when we see it" definition, which I think a famous Supreme Court justice once defined pornography that way, right? But if we're going to tell everybody they can't do that, we can do better than that. And so that's part of the issue is number one, just being able to better articulate what it is. The second thing, though, is no one ever thought about technology-based solutions when these definitions were first created because it didn't exist. In the way that we're talking about now, as my friend Will Hornsby, who many of you know in Chicago, who's an ethics guru, said all these rules were really made for lawyers having one-to-one relationships with their client. So if you look at the basic rules of practice, that's what they're all kind of based on, is that you're going to be looking at a client in front of you. If you're going to do limited scope work, you're going to get their consent right there. If you're going to do any kind of conflict waivers, things like that. Well, if this is all happening online, and particularly if it's being assisted by artificial intelligence, and it is the practice of law, which sometimes it will be, the rules don't, it's a square peg in a round hole. And so Illinois is one of the, Chicago, I should say, but, for the state of Illinois is looking at this. We're one of several states that have task forces or other bodies that have been set up to look at these rules through an access to justice lens. And what do we need to do to modernize, I can't say that word for some reason, modernize these rules to recognize what's changed over that time, but also to make them work better and more efficiently so that the market can work more efficiently and that you all, whether you're in legal aid or in other areas, can do this work more efficiently to connect clients with the legal help they need. It affects a lot more things. So again, there's a few different sessions on this over the next couple days. So if you're interested in that, I encourage you to attend those. But even if you're not attending those, just keep that on your radar, that's going to be another overarching thing that we'll be talking about. So I'll be quiet for now. And who's coming next?
Thanks, Bob.
Glenn's going to tell you.
We just, Nicole, Alaska was one of the first Justice for All states getting that grant from the Public Welfare Foundation. Can you tell us how you use that process to build partnerships in Alaska?
Sure. I'm going to stand up to do that because I have a PowerPoint. And hopefully it's not going to bore you. So I wanted to use a PowerPoint to demonstrate this, or how we use that Justice for All grant to build the partnerships, because we used, part of the grant was allowed us as a community to come together and figure out what our state needed and to understand the landscape in which we were operating, and then set forth a path for us to move forward together collectively. And that was a really important process for us, and we're really grateful that we received funding from the Public Welfare Foundation and from Kresge to make that happen. So let's see. So the first thing to understand how we got to the point where we got, I think it's important that everybody understands the landscape in which we inhabit, the world that we work. And that's one in which we have an enormous, enormous community. Our state is, it's 1/5 the size of the continental U.S., and so the next three biggest states combined fit inside it. And in addition to that, we have a very low population density. So I think that the statistic is something like there is one person for every 1.2 miles in Alaska. So again, we've got huge land area, and very low population density. And on top of that, we have a lot of communities that cover that landscape, and they are not connected to the road system. Most of them are just not accessible by any road. You need to fly into them, or you can get there by snow machine or by boat or plane. And a lot of our communities, we have a couple of, Anchorage is a big city, about 350,000. About half of our population lives there. That's a big city for us. But most of our other communities are very small. They can range from 30 people up to maybe 6,000 in hub communities. So we're trying to deliver justice collectively and solve the justice gap in a place that is very dispersed. But at the same time, we are really, we have a highly centralized system of government that is mostly spooled out through the state and through our larger communities in Anchorage that has sort of like a wheel and hub spoke model where we're throwing out justice or trying to deliver justice through that system and not doing it like super effectively. So that's the landscape that we were in when we set about trying to figure out how we might do better. And so the first thing that we wanted to know when we set about this process is actually what were people doing? When people had a legal problem, what did they do about it? And so we used part of our Justice for All grant to use social network analysis to figure out actually what people did. And so we surveyed, and Miguel Willis, he's not here right now, but he actually did this work as a consultant as part of our grant to figure out what in Alaska, what somebody who has a legal problem, what they actually did. We surveyed community partners, so that's social service organizations, healthcare providers, librarians, just the full gambit of people, anybody, police officers, anybody who might run into somebody with a legal problem. What did you do at that point? And we found out that it turns out when people had a legal problem, the most referred to entity in the state was Alaska Legal Services. They were sending them to us. And we were getting more referrals in the court system than the Family Law Self-Help Center, which is run by the court system, from the police, from everyone else. And at one point, that makes me feel kind of good. I'm like, well, I'm really proud of that. We have good name value, people trust us, we're a good community resource, and people want to come to us. But the problem with that is everyone here who is a legal aid provider, we don't have capacity. We are the least resource player in all of the social network, right? We don't have the resources to serve everybody. We are turning away one person for everyone that we serve. And nobody goes into legal aid because they want to turn somebody away. Nobody does. So this, in some senses, it makes me proud that we have, that our community relies on us, but also it's heartbreaking because they're coming to us and we're wasting our time and their time, and nobody's getting the help they need. And so we really wanted to figure out a way that we might do better. Now, one more thing I wanted to say about us when we were trying to figure out how we would do better. Now, where did my slide go? There we go. Oh, this one, sorry. So one thing that I wanted to know, we knew going into it that Alaska Legal Services, we were doing a pretty good job reaching out to these rural communities. We knew, if you see the little dots on this map, those are in 1 year reflective of the number of people, the number of communities we were able to serve people in. So in this year, we served people in 197 different communities. And I was really proud of that fact, right? Because most of these communities, 90% of them are off the road system, really, really off the road system. And so we're really getting out there. But we were wondering, like, how are we doing that? We're not being able to serve all that many people, relatively speaking, with respect to those who actually need help. We were only able to help about 7,500 people per year, but we did have really widespread distribution. And one thing we knew about how we had done that was over the course of the years, in order for us to continue to deliver services in this state, we had to build really tight, close-knit relationships with our community partners. This meant in our rural communities, we were embedded in tribal social service organizations, with domestic violence shelters, with anyone who could give us free office space, honestly, in most of our rural communities. And that created this really tight network, referral network. But we still didn't have the resources to serve everyone who was coming our way. So the next step of our Justice for All grant process was really mapping out where all the legal resources were in our state. And it was really no surprise that all the private lawyers were they're represented in blue, and they're mostly in those areas that are connected, the bigger cities, and that are connected on the road system. We would call it South Central Alaska. There's some in Juneau, which is our state capital. But for the most part, private lawyers are in the city. You get a little bit more distribution of the legal providers if you rope in Alaska Legal Services, maybe the public defenders, and there are a few private lawyers in our hub communities, but not in any of our villages. So we use some asset mapping, community asset mapping, to find out that information. One of the things to know about our state, too, is that we have there's not a lot of infrastructure, and the economies of scale just really don't work out to grow a lot of infrastructure within the state when we're talking about having really low population density. And so we were wondering, and we thought, I wonder if there's anyone else in our state who has a greater reach than we do, that has a better infrastructure. And we immediately realized that the healthcare system, there was somebody in every single community that was connected to our tribally operated healthcare system. And we also realized that there were social service providers who had a broader reach than we had and this mostly came through our tribal social service organizations. So that led us to the conclusion that really, if we wanted to expand our reach and get out into communities that were a little bit, to do a better job of serving people, not only did we want to piggyback on somebody else's infrastructure, but we also wanted to see if we could rope them, I don't want to say rope, but we want to pull them gently into the work that we're doing to help solve for these problems. And so during this time, Alaska Legal Services we were already in the process of building medical legal partnerships with our tribally operated healthcare centers. But those were mostly established by embedding an attorney in a hospital, which were in hub communities. We realized through our community asset mapping process that the healthcare providers, the community health aides, behavioral health aides, which most villages have, we could extend our reach if we could tap into that resource. And so we started working with our tribally operated healthcare system to develop online training tools to help community health aides screen and detect unmet civil legal needs. And so we're continuing to work in that process, which is delivering legal aid through our healthcare system. And this will also, we think, provide us with a really great opportunity to work when the Legal Navigator is up and running. We'll be providing training to community health aides, behavioral health aides, and the dental health aides on how to use the Legal Navigator, which will help extend resources and bring them out in that way also. One of the things that we've learned too, although we're partnering with our local university, but which is primarily focused on developing training materials for our community health aides. But anybody can take those courses as well. So you could have social workers that are not connected with the community health aides that will be able to take those courses, or just somebody who wants to help somebody else out and wants to empower their community to understand what their rights are and understand how to access legal services. So that's it.
Thank you, Nico. Neilani, Hawaii was also a Justice for All state, but you had somewhat different experiences and partnerships that you built. Can you tell us how that process worked there, especially the work that you did with the community navigators?
So similar to Alaska, we are a state of, well, islands, but the fact that we actually, we are a hub in Honolulu, and then we've got a rural community, and so we're pretty spread out. One of the projects that came out of the JFA system was a notion of community navigators. And the idea is similar to what Alaska did with their health providers, but it's really looking at community individuals and volunteers that we could train in a way to better understand the legal needs that they might be facing or the people that they're serving are facing. I think it's important for us to talk about that also in the context of the legal navigators. We're talking about this idea of portals and building, really building that community around and the partnerships that come with the opportunities for portals. Portals are really seen in a lot of these communities as ways to get more information more easily to people that actually have some understanding about how to use a technology system. So one of the things that we found when you started talking to community about portals and technology is that they talked about a population that they serve that maybe didn't have access. And so we see community navigators or those individuals in social service organizations and community health centers, in libraries, or as we talk about the kupuna or the elders in small communities that everybody goes to for questions and help, as the individuals that if we could train and provide access through a portal, they would better be able to serve their communities or at least get them to the resources that they have. I think those partnerships were really important for us in terms of starting to build what the system actually looked like. And because of this network and because of the JFA process, when we started the human-centered design of this portal, we engaged many of them in the conversations to find out what did they need, what did they think they needed, what are the things that we could do better in designing this. The partnerships that came out of at least the project with the Legal Navigator project are really important, I think, not just at the social service provider level, which is really where the community navigators, but really with the courts engagement, with the, and with the national engagement of folks here, the LSC, the National Center for State Courts got involved in some of the projects. You had Pro Bono Net, the Pew Charitable Trust, and I think with those integrations and talking with the court systems, you also got the buy-in from people to really be engaged. the court systems participated in all of our conversations in the community. We had judges that participated when we talked with people about what the Community Navigator program was going to look like, as well as what, ultimately as we started to do the human-centered design around the portal. I think it really is an opportunity to bring community together. So if you are looking at those conversations, people will come because there's going to be a product at the end, right? There's an opportunity to build a product that people will come to see. Our current legal navigator, and I want to talk just briefly about it because I do think it's different from what's happening out there in other portals, is that we have a location information that's embedded. So there's an ability for the system to know where someone is in order to find out the resources that are in those communities. Again, this goes back to the notion of community navigators. People in our small rural communities want to know what the right resource is for them. They don't want to know that the domestic violence provider is in Honolulu when they're living in Hilo, right? So in terms of community, you have to figure out ways to address and bring that resource to those people. And that's one of the things that's been built in as part of the technology in the Legal Navigator. It's not about, do you know where you live? It's just, we know where you live, and then we're going to get you the information. The second thing that's part of this process, which was really important for our community navigators and the people that we talked about, was about guided assistant. And it's called guided assistant, which is really an idea of creating personalized action plans for individuals so they actually know what the next step is. And so as these are being built, they're very specific about what's your question, about do you have kids, do you not have kids? You don't have kids, and we're not going to provide you with information about custody if it's a divorce. So that kind of customization was also really important to the people that we worked with around designing the project. And then the third thing that I think is really, which is really engages the partnerships and the communities, are really, and this is where the technology piece comes in, and I'm not a technologist, I'm learning, it's where APIs come in, and the ability for connections between different kinds of databases. So we are working with the United Ways nationally through the support of the Pew Charitable Trust to do an API integration with their databases around kind of the social service providers in the community. One of the conversations was, and for legal service providers, you guys all know this, there's always someone in your office that has to go around to figure out what the actual number is for the social service provider or where to send somebody, and you have somebody in your office that's doing that. So the idea is always, if we can do an integration with a United Way or a 211 line who already has to get that update, then we don't have to be running around and calling different people about, is your office open? What's the time at your office? Can we send somebody there? And this is kind of the notion of how you can use technology to kind of bridge those gaps. The second type of integration that's part of this project are court integrations. We really are looking at ways to connect with the courts to be able to get information directly from the courts. And again, that comes from the partnerships and the interests of the community navigators in being able to say, I don't know how to do this, but if I could just press a button or find the resource, and I can tell somebody, hey, go check to find out if your husband filed a divorce against you. So at least we can start those processes. And then the third area is case management. It's also work and ability to get people directly to organizations, legal services organizations, through online intake, so that they can actually get the services that they need. And ultimately, I think in our long run, hoping that the information that they received from the Legal Navigator will be able to be pushed to the legal services organization so that people know what they got before they even walked in the door. So you're not having to repeat the steps, or at least just clarifying information that they may have received. One of the things that we found out in this process, and I thought it was really important, it's important to share with all of you, is that social service agencies and referrals, I think of ourselves sometimes as dated around technology, but when we started to have conversations about looking at integrations with and referrals to social service organizations, most of them didn't have systems. We think as legal services organizations that we're a little bit behind, but because of case management systems and all of the requirements that we have on the data side, we have actually fairly robust systems that manage our data. When we're talking to social service providers, some of the bigger social service providers in my community, we asked them, well, how does somebody apply for services, or how do you get information? And they said, oh, we have this Excel spreadsheet that we put their information in. And we said, well, we can't integrate with an Excel spreadsheet. But it really started to have a conversation in my head, and I think starting to be advocates for social service agencies around the notion of building technology for them as well. And I think, again, the whole conversation around partnerships and portals, it really is an opportunity to get more engaged with the people that you work with, but also see what their needs are and figure out how you might be able to advocate for a social service organization around technology and why it would be important to your clients. Because so much of what we do, we're only one part of the solution, right? In the bigger picture of how to help people out of poverty or help people reduce burdens. And so those integrations are always going to be important. So that's how I think everything came together for us around this project and kind of the engagement of our community navigators. Thank you.
Thanks, Neilani. Well, we've heard a lot about building the people side of the collaborations with the other partners, but we're here at a technology conference, and there are a lot of challenges. Neilani talked about it just a little bit with the lack of systems. Somebody that's been very involved in this is Gwen Daniels, who does the technology for Illinois Legal Aid Online. So, Gwen, would you talk to us about some of the technology challenges of these partnerships? Besides the microphone.
Yeah. So Amy talked a bit about our partnerships with the legal self-help centers. And that's one of the partnerships that we've done. But if you really want to get into the ones that, in fact, have raised technology challenges for us, it's working with our legal aid partners. We have a product called the Online Triage and Intake System, or OTIS, which is a platform that we developed to support online intake through our website, illinoislegalaid.org, that then gets routed to 7 different legal aid providers in Illinois. 3 of them are LSC funded, 4 of them are not, and one of those 4 is the Justice Entrepreneurs Project or the Chicago Bar Foundation, which is low-cost legal services. And so some of the challenges that we have is trying to build a system that's going to work for 7 programs with different sizes, different geographies, different case acceptance priorities, and different staffing levels. And so understanding the level of flexibility that we had to build into this product in order to make it successful from the start. The best thing we did when we started OTIS in 2013 was to get everybody in a room for 2 days and talk about what they did, how they did it, and then start thinking about, okay, how can we translate some of this offline stuff into something that's going to scale online? And that led us to doing things like adding a field in our online triage system that allows them to, each organization at various levels, whether it be an office level or an organization level, say, we will only take X number of cases through the system in X and Y problem area per day, week, or month. And they can set it to unlimited, but they can also say, we only have the capacity to take 2 food stamp cases a day. Don't send us any more than that. So send the next, the third user needs to go somewhere else because we just don't have the capacity. But also give them the flexibility to go in and change it at any time. We had a program last year had to go in and turn off all of their domestic violence online intake because their one domestic violence attorney went on maternity leave for 3 months. And so they had no capacity to do those cases. Understanding what you want to evaluate down the line early on is important because nobody calls anything the same thing. I know Glenn is really big on standards, but it's really hard to go back and retrofit. All of these organizations are on LegalServer. They all have outcomes. They are not the same across any organization. We pulled the list together. We had a TIG project to do a collaborative data system to try to compare across the 3 LSC programs. And we ended up with a list of like 1,000 different outcomes and very little overlap across the partners. What we were able to do with that was to say, okay, let's take this set and let's come up with a list and we'll map across Prairie State set to these 8 top outcomes, Land of Lincoln to these same 8, Legal Aid Chicago to these same 8, and then we can actually compare things together. So understanding what the data that you want to collect is and how they differ across your partner's data sets and how you're going to translate across them is really important. Technology is never done. We built this platform, it went live in 2013. just last week, we hired and he started on Monday, a full-time product manager for the Otis to support the organizations and continue the development of it. Because having me spend a little bit of my time on it, have my executive director spend a little bit of time on it, is not going to continue to allow it to grow into the main intake point for legal services in Illinois. We needed a full-time person who can keep our partner organizations engaged, train them on using the system, and to encourage them to not only ensure that the online experience is fantastic, but also ensure that once the user comes to our website, completes an online application, it gets transferred into their case management system, that the offline experience is also excellent. We have had instances where Amy has gotten feedback from users that said, I filled out this application, the program was supposed to call me at 9 o'clock on Monday morning, and I never heard from them. That's not something anybody wants to happen. Sometimes it's been technical issues that I've had to address. Sometimes it's just been 9 o'clock on Monday morning is not a good time to schedule callbacks. And we've gone in and allowed the programs to work around that, and now people don't schedule. We have programs that don't schedule callbacks within 2 business days. If you apply on Monday, your earliest callback that you could schedule is on Wednesday. We've built it into the ability for them to contact us to say, we're going to be closed for a staff party on Friday. Can we just mark that as a holiday, and then nobody can schedule a callback that day? And so that's another thing that we've had to be able to do for them. But those are all things that have happened over time, and so the technology is never done, and having ongoing maintenance, support costs, funding for those costs, resources to do that, and somebody to manage that are still things that have to go into any technology projects with partners. And finally, and I'm guilty of forgetting this a lot, our partners who have to administer this system on our website are users too. And so it's really important that we put the administrative interface in front of them and let them test it out and treat them as the same sort of user testing and evaluation, and get feedback from them the same way we would with client users using the front end.
Thanks, Gwen. And I want to echo what Gwen said about, she touched on standards. One of the partnerships that we've built out of Legal Navigator is working with the National Center for State Courts and others to develop a set of standards for data exchanges so that we will be able to exchange data among the different partners. One of the things that we really want for Legal Navigator is not just to make cold referrals, not just to send somebody over someplace and never know what happens. We want the ability to get information back from that provider so that we can see, was that a good referral? If not, what was wrong with it? We want to be able to feed that into the artificial intelligence engine so that it gets smarter and smarter about making those referrals, that the system gets smarter about making the referrals, because there's nothing more frustrating for our clients than getting bounced around. And that's one thing that we should all look to as we build partnerships, is build safeguards in there for the clients so they're not getting bounced around, so that where we send them. You've heard me say this saying about standards before. Standards are like toothbrushes. Everybody needs one, but nobody wants to use anybody else's. We've got to get better in legal services about working with a set of standards and not everybody trying to go out and build something that only works for themselves. That's just not something that's really viable for our community if we want to do these types of partnerships with social service agencies and with the courts and with others on these types of data exchanges. And then I'd also echo what Gwen said about when you're going into something and you need to evaluate it, at the very beginning, start looking at the data that you're going to need to collect to do that. Because there's nothing worse if you're doing a partnership and you want to actually see how it's working, to get to the end of it and say, oh, we didn't have any baseline data before we did this to see whether or not we actually did something that was successful and all. So now we'd like to open it up to you. We've got a great panel here for you to ask questions. what partnerships are you thinking about? What would you like to ask them about, how you can do better with building partnerships in your state? John? The question is, what about sustainability of the partnerships and the platforms that have been put online? What are the plans, and how have you found to sustain it? Illinois Legal Aid Online's been going on the longest. What lessons would you have for sustainability for us?
I mean, we've been very, very fortunate in Illinois that we have some amazing funders. And one of the things with like the Otis project and also with the Legal Self-Help Center Navigators is, Otis in particular, there's a strong support from the Lawyers Trust Fund of Illinois to support that particular platform. They've done, in 2018, they hired an external evaluator to come in and evaluate the system. That made some recommendations, including the need for the full-time Otis product manager, and so they funded that position for us. They continue to engage with our with all of our partners to encourage the use of it. The Chicago Bar Foundation also encourages their grantees to contribute to the statewide website as well as financially supporting LAO. Thanks. Do you want to talk to Amy about the Legal Self-Help Center and how that is sustained?
I mean, it's definitely a challenge maintaining those relationships. We have a big state, not as big as Alaska, but it's 102 counties, and I travel as much as I can, but it's only it's a big part of my job, but it's only part of my job, and so, I mean, it's really important to to maintain the engagement, either with emails or phone calls, in-person visits, every so often, or sometimes just reaching out with an email, just a reminder that we're still here. What can I provide? Just a reminder that we're still around and we're there to support them, even if they're not seeking help. We just want to offer it, just to let them know that we will be there for them in case they need it. So yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing challenge for me to determine, should I put it on a schedule, and I try to visit everyone, every 3 years or something. But it's something I think about, and I think one of the ways we try to sustain the contact is through a listserv. And I mean, not everyone is paying attention to my emails, but I try to, contact them monthly, just provide information about new resources, or either our resources or something else out there that might be of use to them. So that's what I do.
So one thing one lesson I've learned through our partnerships, and I think also that relates to sustainability, is that through the depth of your partnerships, we've been able to find other sources of funding that have been opened up to us that we didn't know that they were available. So for instance, our healthcare partners in the tribally operated healthcare system have been able to bring resources to the table that we previously did not have access to. And so right now they're generously donating time of their, they have a distance learning network developers who will help us develop that content. And they also help us seek resources to maintain that and support it. Similarly with our other community partnerships, I can think of, for instance, with our domestic violence shelters, they're oftentimes able to access funding streams that we aren't aware of, and then can tap into funds to support the project. So I guess all that to say is that I think by building the partnerships, you can access additional resources and then sort of braid and blend your funding streams together a bit to provide greater strength for the project overall.
Quick point, to just add to what were already really great points is getting back to the idea of engaging the market a little bit more here for the people who are above legal aid eligibility, and coming up with systems and rules that support those systems that allow the market marketplace to work better for the people who can afford to pay something will benefit everybody. So have any of you ever seen like a LegalZoom commercial, for instance? Anybody watch sports? There's a few nods here. For whatever reason, all the major sporting events, they are big advertisers. I watch a lot of sports, so I end up seeing a lot of these ads. They are, I'm not doing a commercial for LegalZoom when I say this, but the ads are fantastic. And, I think everybody in legal aid thinks, wow, like we're turning away half the people who come see us. The last thing we need to do is to get the word out more. But for people above the legal aid eligibility and a lot of the people coming into these portals, the thing they really have a hard time doing is finding their way in, finding their way to a lawyer, and lawyers are having a hard time finding clients. A lot of the system is if we can get better at letting the market support it, we'll invest in the systems that will support all of us. The same technologies, the same things, just out of self-interest. And the other point, which I think you've heard a little bit from Alaska and Hawaii already, is the courts are starting to see this in their self-interest too, because with the growth of pro se litigants and the number of people coming in looking for help, they're seeing a lot more value in these systems and are more willing to invest on their own and prioritize them themselves, which is the other, I think, really important thing for sustainability.
Well, and John, to kind of round out the talk about sustainability, I'll tie that back a little bit to what Gwen was saying, what I was saying about the evaluation data. I think something that we have to do really if we want to be good at sustainability is to capture the time savings for the people involved in these projects, not just our clients, but also for the providers, to show them the business case for this. If we can show them that we're getting them good referrals, that instead of, turning down, half of the people that come in there, that they get much better referrals, and so they're not spending as much time on intake, that when they actually get the person, they're likely going to be qualified. I think we can show the partners the need to contribute to sustain a portal so that it can cut down on their workload of what they have to be doing on their end once the client gets to them. Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, the question is basically are the settings that the programs configure for accepting cases, is it an automated or manual process? And it's a manual process. Every partner organization has an admin account on our website. They can go in and set their settings up, and they can modify them at any time.
Anybody else? Okay, well, we'll give you back a couple of extra minutes this afternoon, so thank you very much.